Hi, good afternoon. I want to talk with you just about some of the highlights in Chapter 1. But before I do so, I just want to make some brief notes about the uses of these videos. I hope that you aren't using them to try to replace the reading. You're going to be disappointed if you're trying to do that. There's just not enough content that's here. I am highlighting some important things in Chapter 1 that are meant to enhance your understanding of the reading and not replace it. So make sure that you're reading Chapter 1, that you've done the annotations, and then just use this as a review to make sure that you have a good understanding of the course material. So Chapter 1 was an introduction to communication studies. For the most part, it was a broad overview of what the field of communication is and kind of highlighted some of the areas that we are going to talk about through the course of the semester. And I want to talk about a few of those. And so I've just created a few highlights from each of the sections in the chapter. So Chapter 1 looked at a long history of communication and also talked about the forms of communication. It talked about how communication has been studied over time and how that's varied, and you will want to go back and read that. A key takeaway that I want you to remember throughout this class is that the study of communication can really help you develop skills that can yield lifelong benefits in multiple levels: academic, professional, personal, and civic. And we read about some of those in Chapter 1. But overall, this class is going to be what you make of it. And I would really encourage you to use it as an opportunity to develop and refine those skills, because they really can have benefits. One of the important things that Chapter 1 does is define communication. And your book defines communication as the process of generating meaning by sending and receiving symbolic cues that are influenced by multiple contexts. And one of the things that I asked you to do in the annotations is to come up with your own definition of communication. So what does that mean to you, and what does communication encompass in that way? And I look forward to seeing some of the discussions that you have there. We looked at 5 different forms of communication. So intrapersonal communication is how we communicate with ourselves. Interesting note, you should look at the article that I posted in the annotations. It tells us how some people think differently and don't self-talk as much as other people. Interpersonal communication is how we communicate with those closest to us, so friends, family members, coworkers. Group communication is how we work in small groups or organizations to get things done. Public communication are speeches, usually one person standing in front of an audience delivering a speech. And then mass communication is when public communication is seen on a large scale, usually through media. So when we see presidential speeches that are televised, debates that are televised, all of those are examples of mass communication. Section 2 of the textbook talked about different communication processes. There are a ton of different models of communication. One of the things that I included in the annotations is a quick video that I think very quickly and very succinctly summarizes the different models of communication. But there's the transition model, oftentimes called the linear model of communication, which says that communication is just one way. So there's a sender who's communicating a message to a receiver, and that's it. The interaction model went beyond that, and it said communication is a two-way process. So we are both sending and receiving messages. We switch sides back and forth, and we interact to create meaning. And then the transaction model built on that and said that communication is a process where we'll simultaneously are communicating. So I'm both a sender and a receiver of messages when I'm in a conversation. And a lot of the meaning is based on a variety of contexts, whether that's the social context we're in, the relationship context, and our cultural contexts that are there. Section 1.3 talked about some communication principles. Again, it discusses how communication skills can positively affect our academic, professional, personal, and civic lives. And it also talked about how we use communication all the time to meet a variety of needs, whether those are physical needs, instrumental needs, which is trying to get something done or accomplish a goal, relationship needs, so how we connect and relate to people. Also, conflict management, all of those things would be under relationship needs. And then, of course, identity needs. So we use communication both verbally and non-verbally to express who we are. We say, you know, I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm a sibling, I'm a spouse. We use communication to explain what we do. And so we communicate our identity in a variety of ways, and we do that through communication. And then also, chapter 1.3 talked about how communication is a process. It goes through a similar cycle when we look at that. Sometimes it's a very complicated process. Communication is irreversible. So once something is out there, it's really hard to take back. We can apologize for it, but we can't remove it. It's guided by culture and context. So how I communicate is definitely derived from my culture. It's how I've been taught to communicate, and it depends on the context that I'm in. So I don't communicate the same way with students as I do with friends. It's bound by rules and norms, and there are lots of healthy conversations there on what rules and norms we follow, and that is also culturally bound. And then, of course, communication is guided by ethical choices and implications. We see examples of speakers who make unethical choices all the time. And one of the things your book points out is that, you know, there's a dilemma that's there, and we have to make personal choices on whether we think we're communicating in ethical ways and if our message is an ethical decision. And sometimes those decisions can be pretty complicated. And then last, section 1.4 talks about communication competence, which is just our ability to understand effective and appropriate communication patterns, and then to apply and adapt those skills in a variety of contexts. Some things that are important to keep in mind is that communication competence is a skill that can be developed, and it's only going to be developed if we become a more mindful communicator and we're able to self-monitor ourselves and understand how we are communicating. And then the last thing that I want to highlight in this section is that a lot of people are concerned about being nervous, speaking in front of others, having general communication anxiety or public speaking anxiety. And I just want to reassure you that that is a very normal feeling. It's commonly experienced by most people. Even people who have a ton of public speaking experience will say that they're nervous speaking in front of an audience. But the good news is that there are a lot of strategies that we can use to help manage that anxiety some, and chapter 1.4 is the beginning of looking at those. So I hope that you enjoyed reading chapter 1 and doing those annotations, reading the annotations that I've made. It is just an introductory chapter, and it gives us a good basis for what we're going to be discussing this semester. If you have any questions at all about chapter 1, please let me know. Thank you.